The discovery. The air in the ancient temple was thick with the scent of incense and the weight of centuries. Dr. Elara Voss adjusted the strap of her satchel, her fingers brushing against the cool stone walls as she descended deeper into the labyrinthine structure. The temple, hidden deep within the jungles of Cambodia, had been untouched for millennia, its secrets guarded by time and nature. Elara had spent years deciphering obscure texts and following cryptic clues to find this place. Now, standing in the heart of the temple, she felt a mixture of awe and trepidation. The chamber she entered was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, depicting scenes of creation, destruction, and rebirth. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which rested a scroll. It was unlike anything Elara had ever seen. The parchment was impossibly old, yet it showed no signs of decay. The edges were gilded with gold, and the surface seemed to shimmer faintly, as if imbued with some ancient power. Elara approached the pedestal with reverence, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent her entire career studying ancient texts, but this was something else entirely. As she carefully unrolled the scroll, she was struck by the sheer volume of names inscribed upon it. They were written in a script she had never encountered before, yet somehow she could read them. Each name seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if the very essence of the person it represented was contained within the ink. Hours passed as Elara pored over the scroll, her mind racing with the implications of what she had found. The names were not just random, they were organized in a way that suggested a timeline. She recognized names from history, kings, philosophers, artists, but there were also names of people who had lived in obscurity, their lives long forgotten. And then there were names that had yet to be born, names of people who would live in the future. Elara's breath caught in her throat as she realized the true nature of the scroll. It was a record of every human being who had ever lived, and who would ever live. The sheer magnitude of it was overwhelming. But as she continued to scan the names, a growing sense of unease settled over her. Something was wrong. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was a dissonance, a disruption in the flow of names. And then she saw it. Her own name was missing. Elara stared at the scroll, her mind reeling. How could her name not be there? She had spent her life studying the past, uncovering the stories of those who had come before her. She had always believed that her life was part of a greater tapestry, a thread woven into the fabric of history. But now, faced with the absence of her name, she felt untethered, as if she didn't belong. Her eyes were drawn to the final name on the scroll. It was written in a different script, one that seemed to shift and change as she looked at it. The name was unfamiliar, yet it resonated with a strange familiarity. It was a name that shouldn't exist, a name that defied logic and reason. And it was hers. Elara's hands trembled as she stared at the name. She felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead, her mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. How could her name be the final one? What did it mean? And why was it written in such a strange, otherworldly script? The chamber seemed to grow darker, the air heavier. Elara felt a presence, something ancient and powerful, watching her. She rolled up the scroll with shaking hands and placed it back on the pedestal. She needed to get out of there, to think, to process what she had just discovered. But as she turned to leave, she heard a voice, faint but clear, whispering in her mind. Elara! She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice was familiar, yet alien, as if it came from a place beyond time and space. Elara, you are the end. The words sent a shiver down her spine. She didn't understand what they meant, but they filled her with a deep, primal fear. She hurried out of the chamber, the weight of the scroll's secrets pressing down on her. As she emerged into the sunlight, she felt a sense of relief, but it was short-lived. The scroll had changed everything. She had set out to uncover the mysteries of the past, but now she was faced with a question that threatened to unravel her very existence. Why was her name missing from the scroll? And why was it the final name, written in a script that defied understanding? Elara knew that she couldn't ignore what she had found. She had to delve deeper, to uncover the truth behind the scroll and its connection to her. But as she looked back at the temple, she felt a sense of foreboding. The answers she sought might come at a price, one she wasn't sure she was willing to pay. The scholar's dilemma. Elara Voss stood at the edge of the jungle, the temple's shadow stretching long behind her. The sun was setting, casting the world in hues of orange and gold, but the beauty of the moment was lost on her. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, each more unsettling than the last. The scroll had upended everything she thought she knew about history, time, and her place in the world. She couldn't simply walk away, not now, not after what she had seen. But where to begin? The scroll was ancient, its origins shrouded in mystery. The temple itself was a relic of a civilization long forgotten, its builders lost to time. Elara knew she needed more information, more context, to understand what she had found. She needed to consult experts, to cross-reference the scroll with other ancient texts, to see if anyone else had encountered something like this before. Her first stop was Phnom Penh, where she had contacts at the National Museum. She spent days in the archives, poring over every text she could find that mentioned the temple or anything resembling the scroll. But the more she searched, the more she realized how unique the scroll was. There were no references to it in any known historical records, no myths or legends that matched its description. It was as if the scroll had been deliberately erased from history. Frustrated but undeterred, Elara decided to expand her search. She reached out to colleagues around the world, sending them cryptic messages about her discovery. Most dismissed her claims as the ramblings of an overworked scholar, but a few were intrigued. One of them, Dr. Rajesh Patel, a linguist specializing in ancient scripts, agreed to meet her in person. They met in a small cafe in Bangkok, the air thick with the scent of spices and the hum of conversation. Rajesh was a tall, wiry man with a sharp mind and a keen eye for detail. He listened intently as Elara described the scroll, his expression growing more serious with each word. "A scroll that lists every name, past and future?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "That's extraordinary. And you say your name was missing, but appeared at the end in a different script?" Elara nodded, her hands clasped tightly around her coffee cup. "Yes, and the script, it wasn't like anything I've ever seen. It was almost alive." Rajesh frowned, his fingers tapping against the table. "I've studied hundreds of ancient scripts, but I've never heard of anything like that. If you're willing, I'd like to see the scroll for myself." Elara hesitated. The scroll was her only lead, and she wasn't sure she was ready to share it with anyone else. But she knew she couldn't do this alone. She needed help, and Rajesh was one of the few people she trusted. "All right," she said finally, "but we need to be careful. This scroll, it's not just a historical artifact. There's something more. I can feel it." Rajesh nodded, his expression serious. "Understood. Let's start by getting a closer look at that script. If we can decipher it, we might be able to understand why your name is written that way." The next few weeks were a blur of research and analysis. Elara and Rajesh worked tirelessly, comparing the scroll's script to every known language and writing system. They consulted experts in cryptography, mythology, and even quantum physics, hoping to find some clue that would explain the scroll's origins and purpose. But the more they studied, the more elusive the answers became. The script seemed to defy all logic, shifting and changing in ways that made it impossible to pin down. It was as if the scroll was alive, resisting their attempts to understand it. One night, as they were working late in Rajesh's cramped office, Elara had a breakthrough. She had been staring at the scroll for hours, her eyes aching from the strain, when she noticed something she hadn't seen before. The script at the end of the scroll, the one that contained her name, wasn't just different from the rest. It was inverted, as if it had been written from the perspective of someone looking back through time. "Rajesh, look at this," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "The script, it's not just a different language. It's a mirror image. It's as if it was written by someone, or something, that exists outside of time." Rajesh leaned in, his eyes narrowing as he studied the scroll. You're right, he said slowly. But what does that mean? Who or what could have written this? Elara shook her head, her mind racing. I don't know, but I think the scroll isn't just a record of names. I think it's a map of existence itself. And my name, it's not just missing. It's at the end because I'm the end. Rajesh stared at her, his expression a mixture of awe and fear. Elara, if that's true, if you're somehow connected to the end of existence, what does that mean for you? For all of us? Elara didn't have an answer. She felt a cold knot of dread forming in her stomach, the weight of the scroll's secrets pressing down on her. She had set out to uncover the mysteries of the past, but now she was faced with a question that threatened to unravel her very existence. Why was her name the final one? And what did it mean for the future? The mirror of time. The revelation hung heavy in the air between Elara and Rajesh. The scroll was no mere historical artifact. It was a map of existence, a record of every soul that had ever lived and would ever live. And Elara's name, written in an inverted, otherworldly script, marked the end of that record. The implications were staggering, and neither of them could fully grasp what it meant. Rajesh leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. Elara, if the scroll is what we think it is, if it's a map of existence, then your name being at the end suggests that you're somehow connected to the end of everything. But how? Why? What does that even mean? Elara stared at the scroll, her mind racing. I don't know, she admitted, but I think the answer lies in the script itself. If it's inverted, if it's written from the perspective of someone outside of time, then maybe it's a message, a warning, or a prophecy. Rajesh frowned. A prophecy? You think the scroll is predicting the end of the world? Not the world, Elara said slowly. Existence itself. The end of all things. And somehow, I'm tied to it. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them like a shroud. Rajesh broke the silence first. We need to find out more about this script. If we can decipher it, maybe we can understand what it's trying to tell us. Elara nodded, though she felt a growing sense of unease. The scroll had already upended her understanding of reality, and she wasn't sure she was ready to face what else it might reveal. But she knew she couldn't stop now. She had to see this through, no matter where it led. Over the next few weeks, Elara and Rajesh threw themselves into their research. They reached out to experts in ancient languages, cryptography, and even theoretical physics, hoping to find someone who could help them decipher the inverted script. But the more they learned, the more they realized how unique and how dangerous the scroll truly was. One evening, as they were working late in Rajesh's office, they received a message from a colleague in Cairo. Dr. Amina Khalil was an expert in ancient Egyptian texts, and she claimed to have seen something similar to the inverted script before. She says it's connected to the concept of the mirror of time, Rajesh said, reading the message aloud. A mythical artifact said to exist outside of time, reflecting the past, present, and future simultaneously. According to legend, whoever gazes into the mirror of time can see the true nature of existence, but at a great cost. Elara's heart raced. The mirror of time, that could explain the inverted script. If the scroll was written by someone or something that exists outside of time, then it would make sense that the script is inverted. It's a reflection of our reality, seen from the other side. Rajesh nodded, his expression grim. But if that's true, then the scroll isn't just a record. It's a window, a way to see beyond the boundaries of time. And if your name is at the end, Elara, this could mean that you're not just connected to the end of existence. You might be the key to it. Elara felt a chill run down her spine. You think the scroll is pointing to me? That I'm somehow responsible for the end of everything? I don't know, Rajesh admitted, but we need to find out. If the mirror of time is real, if it's connected to the scroll, then it might hold the answers we're looking for. Elara took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. All right, let's go to Cairo. If anyone can help us understand this, it's Dr. Khalil. The journey to Cairo was a blur of airports, taxis, and restless nights. When they finally arrived, They were greeted by Dr. Amina Khalil, a tall, elegant woman with sharp features and an air of quiet authority. She led them to her office, a cluttered space filled with books, artifacts, and the faint scent of incense. "The mirror of time," Amina said, settling into her chair. "It's a fascinating concept, one that appears in several ancient cultures. The Egyptians, the Mayans, the Sumerians. They all have stories of a mirror or portal that exists outside of time, allowing those who gaze into it to see the past, present, and future simultaneously. But the mirror is also said to be dangerous. Those who look into it risk losing their minds or even their souls." Elara exchanged a glance with Rajesh. "Do you think the scroll is connected to the mirror?" she asked. Amina nodded. "It's possible. The inverted script you described matches descriptions of the mirror's language, a language that exists outside of time, written from the perspective of eternity. If the scroll was created by someone who had gazed into the mirror, it would explain why the script is so unique." "But why would someone create a scroll like this?" Rajesh asked. "What's the purpose?" Amina hesitated, her expression darkening. "According to the legends, the Mirror of Time was created as a warning, a way to show humanity the consequences of its actions. Those who gaze into the mirror see not just the past, present, and future, but the end of all things. The scroll might be a record of that vision, a list of every soul that will ever exist, leading up to the end." Elara's stomach churned. "And my name? If it's at the end, does that mean I'm part of that vision? That I'm connected to the end?" Amina studied her for a long moment, her gaze piercing. "It's possible, but there's another possibility. The legends say that the mirror doesn't just show the future, it can also change it. If your name is at the end, it might not be a prediction. It might be a choice." "A choice?" Elara echoed. "What do you mean?" Amina leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "The Mirror of Time is said to grant immense power to those who can withstand its gaze. Power over life, death, and time itself. If you're connected to the mirror, if your name is at the end of the scroll, it might mean that you have the power to shape the future, to prevent the end or to bring it about." Elara felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. "But how? I don't even know where the mirror is or how to use it." Amina's expression softened. "That's where I might be able to help. There's a temple in the desert, not far from here, said to be the resting place of the Mirror of Time. If you're serious about finding answers, that's where you need to go." Elara looked at Rajesh, who nodded grimly. "We'll go," she said. "But what if we find the mirror? What if we look into it?" Amina's gaze was steady. "Then you'll see the truth. But be warned, the truth can be a heavy burden to bear. The Temple of Eternity." The desert stretched endlessly before them, a sea of golden sand under a blazing sun. Elara and Rajesh had been traveling for hours, guided by Dr. Amina Khalil's directions and a map that seemed to shift and change with every passing mile. The temple they sought was said to be hidden deep within the desert, a place where time itself stood still. As they crested a dune, they finally saw it. A massive structure of weathered stone, half buried in the sand. The Temple of Eternity. Its entrance was flanked by towering statues of ancient gods, their faces worn smooth by centuries of wind and sand. The air around the temple felt heavy, charged with an energy that made Elara's skin prickle. "This is it," Rajesh said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The resting place of the Mirror of Time." Elara nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had come this far, driven by a need to understand the scroll and her place in it. But now, standing before the temple, she felt a surge of doubt. What if Amina was right? What if the mirror showed her something she wasn't ready to see? "We don't have to do this," Rajesh said, as if reading her thoughts. "We can turn back. No one would blame you." Elara shook her head. "No, I need to know. Whatever's in there, I need to face it." They approached the temple cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the sand. The entrance was a dark, gaping maw, and as they stepped inside, the temperature dropped sharply. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of incense and decay. The interior of the temple was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, the walls covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift and move in the flickering light of their torches. Elara felt as though the temple was alive, watching them, testing them. After what felt like hours, they reached the heart of the temple, a vast, circular chamber bathed in an eerie, bluish light. At the center of the chamber stood the mirror of time. It was unlike anything Elara had ever seen. The mirror was enormous, its surface a swirling, liquid silver that seemed to ripple and flow like water. The frame was made of a strange, black metal, etched with symbols that matched the inverted script on the scroll. The air around the mirror crackled with energy, and Elara felt a pull, as if the mirror was calling to her. "This is it," Rajesh said, his voice filled with awe. The mirror of time. Elara approached the mirror slowly, her heart racing. As she drew closer, she saw her reflection, but it wasn't her. The figure in the mirror was her, yet not her. It was older, wiser, and there was a sadness in its eyes that made Elara's chest ache. "Elara," the reflection said, its voice echoing in the chamber. "You've come at last." Elara froze, her breath catching in her throat. Who are you?" "I am you," the reflection replied. "The you that exists outside of time. The you that has seen the end." Elara's mind reeled. "The end? What do you mean?" The reflection stepped closer, its hand pressing against the surface of the mirror. "The scroll you found is a record of existence, a map of every soul that has ever lived and will ever live. But it is also a warning. The end is coming, Elara, and you are the key." "The key?" Elara whispered. "What does that mean?" The reflection's eyes filled with sorrow. "The end is not inevitable. It is a choice that only you can make. The scroll shows the path to the end, but it also shows the path to salvation. You must decide which path to take." Elara felt a surge of panic. "I don't understand. How can I decide the fate of existence? I'm just me." "You are more than you know," the reflection said. "You are the bridge between the past and the future, the link between the mortal world and the eternal. The scroll chose you, Elara. It marked you as the one who must decide." Elara's mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. "But how? How do I decide?" The reflection smiled sadly. "Look into the mirror. See the truth. Then you will understand." Elara hesitated, her heart pounding. She glanced back at Rajesh, who nodded encouragingly. "You can do this, Elara. I'll be right here." Taking a deep breath, Elara turned back to the mirror and stepped closer. The surface rippled as she approached, and she felt a strange sensation, as if she was being pulled into the mirror itself. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, she was no longer in the temple. She was standing in a vast, empty void, surrounded by swirling clouds of light and darkness. Before her was a path, stretching endlessly in both directions. One path was bathed in light, filled with the sounds of laughter and joy. The other was shrouded in darkness, silent and foreboding. "The paths," the reflection said, appearing beside her. "The path of light leads to salvation, a future where existence continues, where life flourishes. The path of darkness leads to the end, a future where all things cease to be." Elara stared at the paths, her heart heavy with the weight of the choice before her. "But how do I choose? How do I know which path is right?" "You must look within yourself," the reflection said. "You must understand the consequences of each choice. The path of light requires sacrifice, a great and terrible sacrifice. The path of darkness is easier, but it leads to oblivion." Elara felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't want to choose. I don't want this responsibility." "You must," the reflection said gently. "The fate of existence rests in your hands. But know this, Elara, you are not alone. You have the strength to make this choice, and whatever you decide, you will not be forgotten." Elara took a deep breath, steeling herself. She looked at the paths again, her mind racing. She thought of everything she had learned, everything she had seen. She thought of the scroll, of her name at the end, of the inverted script that marked her as the key. And then she made her choice, the final choice. Elara stood at the crossroads of eternity, the weight of existence pressing down on her shoulders. The two paths stretched before her, one bathed in light and the other cloaked in darkness. She could feel the enormity of the choice she had to make, a decision that would ripple across time and space, shaping the fate of all that ever was and ever would be. The reflection of her future self stood beside her, its presence both comforting and haunting. "You must choose, Elara," it said softly. "The future depends on you." Elara closed her eyes, trying to quiet the storm of thoughts in her mind. She thought of the scroll, of the endless names inscribed upon it, each one a life, a story, a thread in the tapestry of existence. She thought of her own name, written in that strange, inverted script at the end of the scroll. She was the key, the bridge, the one who would decide whether that tapestry would continue to grow or unravel into nothingness. She opened her eyes and looked at the path of light. It was beautiful, filled with the promise of life and hope. But the reflection had said it required a great sacrifice. What would she have to give up to ensure that future? Her life? Her soul? Or something even greater? Then she turned to the path of darkness. It was silent and cold, a void where nothing existed. It was the easier choice, the path of least resistance. But it was also the end of everything. All the lives, all the stories, all the beauty and pain and love and loss. It would all be erased, as if it had never been. Elara's heart ached with the weight of the decision. She didn't want this responsibility. She didn't want to be the one to decide the fate of existence. But she knew she couldn't turn away. The scroll had chosen her, and she had to see this through. "What happens if I choose the path of light?" she asked, her voice trembling. The reflection's eyes filled with sorrow. "You will have to give up something precious, something that defines you. The path of light demands sacrifice, Elara. It is the only way to ensure that existence continues. And if I choose the path of darkness, then all will end. The scroll will close and existence will cease to be. It will be as if nothing ever was." Elara felt tears streaming down her face. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm strong enough." The reflection placed a hand on her shoulder, its touch warm and reassuring. "You are stronger than you know, Elara. You have already come so far. Trust yourself. Trust your heart." Elara took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She thought of Rajesh waiting for her in the temple. She thought of all the people she had met, all the lives she had touched. She thought of the world, with all its beauty and pain, its joy and sorrow. She thought of the future, of the countless lives yet to be lived. And then she made her choice. She stepped onto the path of light. The moment her foot touched the glowing path, the void around her began to dissolve. The swirling clouds of light and darkness faded, replaced by a brilliant, blinding radiance. Elara felt a surge of energy, a power unlike anything she had ever known. It filled her, consumed her, and for a moment, she felt as though she was one with the universe. But then the pain came. It was sharp and searing, as if her very soul was being torn apart. She cried out, clutching her chest as the light burned through her. She could feel something being ripped away, something essential, something that made her who she was. It was the sacrifice the reflection had warned her about. When the pain finally subsided, Elara collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. The light around her dimmed, and she found herself back in the temple, standing before the mirror of time. Rajesh was beside her, his face filled with concern. "Elara!" he exclaimed, rushing to her side. "Are you all right? What happened?" Elara looked up at him, her vision blurred with tears. I made the choice," she said weakly. "I chose the path of light." Rajesh's eyes widened. "What does that mean? What did you have to give up?" Elara shook her head, her heart heavy with loss. "I don't know. I don't remember. But I know it was something important. Something that mattered." Rajesh helped her to her feet, his grip firm and reassuring. "Whatever it was, you did the right thing, Elara. You saved existence. You saved us all." Elara nodded, though she felt a deep, aching emptiness inside her. She had made the choice, but the cost had been greater than she could have imagined. She didn't know what she had lost, but she knew it was gone forever. As they left the temple and stepped back into the desert, Elara looked up at the sky. The sun was setting, painting the horizon in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, a reminder of the world she had fought to save. "What happens now?" Rajesh asked, his voice soft. Elara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the future on her shoulders. "Now, we live, we move forward, and we make sure that the sacrifice was worth it." Rajesh nodded, his expression resolute. "We'll do it together, Elara. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Elara smiled, though her heart still ached with the loss of what she had given up. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she had made the right choice. The scroll had marked her as the key, the one who would decide the fate of existence. And she had chosen life, hope, and the promise of a future. As they walked away from the temple, the desert stretched out before them, vast and endless. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but Elara knew she wasn't alone. She had Rajesh by her side, and the strength to face whatever came next. The scroll of endless names had been a map, a warning, and a prophecy. But it was also a reminder that every life, every name was a thread in the tapestry of existence. And Elara had chosen to keep that tapestry intact, no matter the cost.